Welcome back to A Little Bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depius, and we are back with another Friday edition of A Little Bit of Cheese. It is Friday, November 15th, 2024. We're about to get set for another rivalry week for the Packers as they'll take on the Chicago Bears for their first time this season. This is a Bears team coming off of their most embarrassing loss of the year, no pun intended there, against the New England Patriots, a 19-3 faltering of Chicago. Sam and I talked about that on Monday. If you didn't hear that one, go check it out, but it was bad for Chicago. They hit a low point in the season, and really they can only go up from here. Where Green Bay, they're coming off of a loss against the Detroit Lions at home. Sam and I are both at that game. It wasn't a terrible game for Green Bay, but there are things that can be improved. And what I'll say about this game for the Packers is you could look at it like a get-right game, like one where the Packers could go in and fix a lot of things. But I think the Packers to go in here and impress me with this game against the Chicago Bears, who right now are 4-5, would be to blow them out and to absolutely knock their socks off. I still have a lot of confidence in this Green Bay team. They played an okay game against Detroit. Of course you don't want to lose in a bad weather game at home against a team that is supposed to be known as the Dome team in Detroit. But that happened. Detroit is probably the best team in the NFL top to bottom right now. It wasn't a terrible game. There was a pick six at the end of the half that changed the entire complexion of it. The only way I could see this as a get-right game for Green Bay would be for Jordan Love to get through this one without the dummy throw. That is the biggest concern right now, I think, for this team, is there is one dummy throw at least every single game for Jordan Love. I don't want to see a dummy throw this week. I want to see this offense work on all cylinders here, like a Matt LaFleur offense has typically done against the Chicago Bears, which we've said this a lot, but I'm going to say the number again. Green Bay has Green Bay has won their last 10 matchups against the Chicago Bears. Matt LaFleur, as the head coach for the Green Bay Packers, has not lost to Chicago. So the confidence right now as Packers fans should be sky high. This is not a game that should be lost in any terms. Chicago looks bad. Their offense is horrible. They have not scored a touchdown, I think, on 24 consecutive drives is the number that I saw. It's been really, really bad for Chicago, and Green Bay should be one of the best teams in the NFL. I think they're right up there. They've lost a couple of close games against some good teams. No, they haven't beaten a lot of good teams. Green Bay has beaten an Arizona team that now looks good in hindsight because they're first in the NFC West, which Christian McCaffrey's back. I don't know if they're going to hang on to that, but I think Arizona's a good team. That's an okay win. I think the LA Rams is an okay win. But this is a Green Bay team that should be right there and end up at least where they were or better than they ended up last year, which was in the divisional round in a one-score game against a team that went to the Super Bowl. They are right there. The competition level is right there. The story that I read this week on Green Bay that I thought was interesting was Matt LaFleur kind of came out and said after the Detroit loss, I think our practices were a little bit more intense last year. We want to go back to what we were doing there, which I'll kind of explain this in layman's terms. The starting units, so the starting offense, would usually compete in practice against a scout team, which would not be the starting defense, and vice versa. The starting defense would face a scout team in practice, and they would try to emulate what a starting NFL unit would look like, but that's just not the case. The talent level's not there. The competition level's not there. This week, actually last week too, they have started implementing the starting offense versus the starting defense into practice. That's what they did at the end of last year, because people seem to forget that Green Bay was 3-6 at this exact same point last year in the season, and then things turned around, and we know how everything all ended up. This team is 6-3. We have really high expectations for this Green Bay team, and I think they're right about where they should be. They haven't played good football. We haven't seen that yet. And in my mind, I think that's only exciting from this point moving forward, is we have not seen the Packers to their full capability. We have not seen Jordan Love play like we know Jordan Love can play. And that's a scary thought for teams when it gets closer to the end of the season. And now Matt LaFleur implementing the same practice regimen that they did at the end of last year as well, having the starting offense go up against the starting defense. you're going to see a lot more intensity. And this is a Bears team that is desperately seeking for a win to just get back to 500 and see what they got in their rookie quarterback. But Green Bay cannot let that happen. That'll be a noon game on Sunday. Where I do want to see Green Bay improve, and it might be a little bit difficult this week, is their third down offense and their red zone offense. On third down offense, they are 19th, below average, which this is a top 10 offense, or at least it should be roster-wise and coaching-wise and personnel-wise. Like, in every way, this should be a top 10 offense. They're 19th on third down offense. And then on red zone opportunities, they are 29th, as they convert only 40% of their red zone opportunities into touchdowns. That is a number that is going to have to improve if you see this team go on to go to the Super Bowl. And they're going to be taking on the number one red zone defense in the Chicago Bears, who only allow 37% of red zone opportunities to go into the end zone. So I want to see improvement here. This would be a big step. If you can improve your red zone offense against a very good red zone defense, I think that's where things can get right. As a unit, I don't see this as a get-right game for the entire team. But there are ways that I want to see this team improve this week, and I think they have the opportunity to do that, and I think they're going to do that. I'm really excited for this. I think, like I said before, we have seen a bad version of Jordan Love. Like, if that's the bad version of Jordan Love, I'm going to take it. Now we just hope that it's not going to get any worse. There is that fear that he doesn't revert back to the same quarterback that we saw in the second half of last year. But we did see that quarterback, and that was very young into his career. And I don't think defenses have figured him out. I think a lot of what's going wrong with Jordan Love is something that can be fixed in the head. It's between the ears. Once he figures that out and starts to take things a little bit more meticulously, I think you see this offense start to explode. I'm very excited, and I hope that starting point is against the Chicago Bears on Monday. Big night this week for Giannis Antetokounmpo. He dropped 59 points against the Detroit Pistons. I watched that game. It went into overtime. The Bucks are able to win it, only their fourth win of the season, as they are now up to 4-8. But Giannis was playing without Damian Lillard, without Chris Middleton. Brooks Lopez played a very good game, which he had been non-existent for quite some time leading up until that point. But Giannis, 59 points. You have to mention it. This guy is unstoppable when he needs to be. And it's where you can look at this Bucks team and you say, okay, they started off 2-8. Things are going bad. But Giannis was always there. Every team to go the distance, you need to have a monster. And Giannis continues to be that monster. He is not slowing down. This is as good as we've seen him play. And he has played like the best player on the face of the planet. He continues to do that. The next game for the Bucks will be against the Hornets tomorrow at 2 p.m. Damian Lillard could be back, but medical reports coming out of Milwaukee are positive for Dame. They are not so positive for Chris Middleton. He has not even worked up to playing 5-on-5 in practice. He has not progressed the way that the Bucks thought he was going to, and he's going to need a little bit more time before he's implemented into that lineup. But the Bucks, things will have to turn around. This team is too talented. I know that I was very negative the way I was talking about them, and I hope that those things don't come into play as this season progresses here. Being too old, not having the young players to come in and give a spark to the offense, and really bad perimeter defense. I hope that this team can continue to play past that. Of course, they beat two bad teams this week to get their their third and fourth wins of the season, to go up to 4-8. You have to start beating the bad teams. They lost to some bad teams early, but this is a good roster. You have one of the best players in the NBA. Things will get better, and they can't fire Doc Rivers, because if they do that, then they have 4 coaches that'll be on the payroll, because they're still paying Bud. They're still paying Adrian Griffin, and they would have to pay Doc Rivers by cutting his contract early, and then they would have to pay whoever they would hire to be next, which might be Darvin Ham. So they cannot go out and fire a Doc Rivers, like I might have been saying before. I know I used it as a possible headline moving into the next week, but that cannot happen. Financially, a business cannot be run that way. So Doc Rivers is going to have to be the guy, and this team is going to have to turn it around. Maybe we started to see it a little bit this week, but now up to 4-8. and watching maybe a season best performance, hopefully not for Giannis, but 59 points against a Pistons team that is young and solid. You love to see it, and I hope they can continue that tomorrow at 2. Now, I do want to apologize. On Monday, Sam and I, we forgot this. We've been coming up with these great segments, and I love where we're at, where we have the cheese grater. We go back and forth, but we did forget our Munster of the weekend. Well, I will give us the Munster of the week, and that award is going to be going to William Contreras, as he was named All-MLB catcher. Means he's the best catcher in all of baseball for this season. The final year statistics: 23 home runs, 92 RBIs, a .281 batting average. He is the first All-MLB player for the Milwaukee Brewers since Christian Yelich, and he is only one of 5 Major League Baseball players to win back-to-back, well, not one of 5 Milwaukee Brewers to win back-to-back Silver Sluggers. And this list is a pretty highly touted one for Milwaukee. Cecil Cooper, Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, Ryan Braun, and Christian Yelich. And I think all of those guys, where Yount and Molitor, they already have their numbers retired by Milwaukee. I believe Ryan Braun is going to have it retired, and I believe Christian Yelich is going to have his retired at one day. Those guys were all MVP caliber players. Cecil Cooper was also a great player in his time, just didn't really have the longevity and was kind of overshadowed by other great players that were playing in Milwaukee at the time. But Braun, Yelich, and now William Contreras, he's kind of a forgettable player because of how consistently good that he is. But as Brewers fans, we kind of need to sit back and appreciate what he's brought, because he is the only Brewer catcher in history to have won a Silver Slugger. It has not happened. I even look back, even when Jonathan Lucroy was on his tear in the early 2010s, he had 53 doubles in a season. He didn't even get Silver Slugger. But William Contreras, where he's at, he is the best catcher in all of baseball. He's not the best defensive catcher in baseball. He doesn't have the most power as a catcher in all of baseball, but best overall, consistent night in, night out. He's going to get MVP votes. That voting is going to go on next week, and we'll see where everything ends up. But he is one of the most valuable players in all of baseball. A solid hitting catcher. You can't take that for granted, and they have it in Milwaukee for at least a couple more seasons. And we only get to see him progress from here on out. I don't think we have seen William Contreras at his best. I think we started to see it at the beginning of this season. He kind of cooled off and then was just consistent the rest of the year. Maybe we get a little bit longer of that .350 batting average where he's hitting doubles like nobody's business. But a very good season. He deserves to be congratulated, and he is this week's Munster of the Week. I do want to touch on this a little bit, but Wisconsin playing Oregon. This is the first time that Wisconsin is playing a number 1 team ranked in NCAA at Camp Randall since 2010. And Wisconsin actually beat Ohio State on that day. Kind of a memorable game for Wisconsin, but I do not give them any sort of a chance this weekend. If they can find a way to keep this game within 14 points, I think you have to count that as a moral victory, because this is a Oregon team. It is the best in the country, and Wisconsin at this point has been beat down, battered. They have looked terrible. They've had their hearts ripped out. Things do not look good. The only positive that you see when it comes to the end of it, maybe they get a win against Minnesota and they get to take the Axe back home. But this has been a bad year for Wisconsin football. You hope that they can just find little ways to improve. But 4 years ago, these two teams met up in the Rose Bowl. Oregon ended up winning it. Justin Herbert was on that team. But you've seen kind of the two ways that these teams have gone, where Oregon now going to compete for a national championship, and Wisconsin is on their second head coach since, and things not looking as bright as they could have been. Things are, of course, changing in Wisconsin, and I know I've talked a lot of negativity this year, and that's because you don't want to see regression in a head coach's second year. Yes, I understand that the schedule is more difficult this year, but you just want to continue to see improvement, and I feel like this team is at the same level or even worse than they were last year, and you don't want to see that in the head coach's second year of his tenure at a school. And all we can do right now is hope for year 3. If it doesn't turn around in year 3, then I think that seat starts to get hot for Luke Fickell. But this is a game on Saturday. It is going to be essentially the funeral for the 2024 Badgers. And maybe the funeral's already happened, and now we're just kind of waiting through the rest of the season, which is kind of how I felt about it, especially ever since that Iowa game. Because that was one where you just watched it, and you knew that this team is really far away from where they want to be and what their aspirations were when they hired a guy like Luke Fickell. So you're trying to stay optimistic, but not a lot of things to be optimistic about for this Badgers team taking on the number 1 team in the nation at Camp Randall on Saturday. So we got a full slate of everything going on this weekend. I'm most excited for Packers taking on the Bears noon on Sunday. I'll be watching the Bucs game tomorrow at 2. And then, of course, the Badgers are going to get throttled by Oregon tomorrow on Saturday. I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be. My name's Cody Depiest. I'm your host. I want to thank you for being here with us once again today. Sam and I will be back on Monday for NFL Reaction Mondays, as we'll be excited to see you once again then when we get back, as this has been another edition of A Little Bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.